In today's tutorial, I'll be teaching you guys how to cut and sew this trendy ruched shoulder dress with overlap and basque waistline. So if this is something that you find interesting and you want to learn, you might want to engage in this video because I've made it well detailed and easy to learn. So not to waste much of your time, let's get started in this. So the material needed here are my Akara fabric. Here I have my 6 yard, but I'll be making use of 4.5 yard here after this whole tutorial. Then I have my zip, my marker, my scissors, and also my drafting paper. So I shall begin by cutting out the pattern of this dress, and here I've already gone ahead to draw my shoulder line, my under bust line, which is actually 13 inches. I also went ahead to get my waistline, which is 17, and I added 4 inches in order to get my back line, which is total of 21 inches. So this is all the horizontal lines I'll be needing for this tutorial. So next I'll go ahead to do is to determine my shoulder measurement, and my shoulder is 16 divided by 2. I'm going to have 8. So I'm just going to mark 8 there. And then the next I'm going to go ahead to do is to determine my neck. So I'm going to be marking 3 inches for my neck width here, and the neck depth is going to be also what, 3 inches. Now this neck I'm actually drafting is not the neck I'll be using for this tutorial. I'm just creating this for just an illustration purpose. Okay, so after doing that, now this is basically what I have. Then on this part where I marked my 8 inch for my shoulder, I'm just going to be adding 10 inches for my sleeve length. That is how gathered I want my sleeve to be. Okay, so I'm just going to be marking 10 inches here, and from that 10 inches I'm going to come down by 1 inch. This is so that I can create my inch my slope. So I'm going to connect this point to back to this point for my shoulder slope. Okay, so after connecting it from that very point where I marked my 1 inch, I'm going to determine the width of my shoulder. That is how wide I want my shoulder to be. So I'm going to mark 10 there, and I'll go ahead and connect it. So next now is to determine my waist, my under bust. So my under bust is 28 divided by 4. I'm going to have 7. So I'm just going to mark that there. So this dress is kind of having more or less like a gathered structure at around the under bust. So what I'm going to basically do is to create an armhole that will create the gathers for the dress. So what I'm basically going to do here is I'm going to go ahead and measure my shoulder. Okay, I'm going to measure from the point of my shoulder, that's this point here. I'm going to measure from this point to the end of my sleeve. Now I'm going to get 18. So what I'm going to do in order to get the gathers for my under bust, I'm going to go 3 inches lesser than what I have got, which is 15 inches. So I'm going to mark 15 inches on my under bust. Okay, so with this now I'm going to connect this point to this very point with a curved line, because here is going to be having gathers. So this is how you're going to get that your ruched effect. Okay, so now next I'm going to go ahead to do is to determine my waist, and my waist is 28 divided by 4. I'm going to have 7. So I'm going to mark that there, and then I'm going to go ahead now on the back line, and from this point I'm going to connect the waistline to this very point for my back effect. Remember that we came 4 inches from the waistline in order to get my back line. So I went ahead now to connect those points together. So next I'm going to go ahead to do is to add my allowance of 1.5 inches. I added it on the waistline and on the under bust, and I connected them together. So next I will go ahead is to determine the depth of my neck. So here I'm going to be determining the front and the back neck depth, because I'm going to be using this pattern to cut both front and back. Okay, so the front depth neck is going to be reaching the under bust line. So I'm just going to connect from that point down to the under bust. Okay, this is how the neck depth of the front is, but here I'm going to label it front. Like I said, I'm going to be using this to cut my front and back. So next now is to determine my back, and I don't want my back to actually be as deep as my under bust. So I'm just going to mark my neck depth to be at 7 inches. Okay, and when I make that, I'm going to connect it back to that neckline. Okay, so this now is going to be my back neckline. So I can go ahead now and be cutting what I'm going to be needing for this tutorial. So after cutting what I will be needing for this tutorial, I went ahead to place it on my fabric and also lining, so I can cut out what I'll be needing. So here I've already cut out the front and the back for my tutorial, and I also went ahead to add a half-inch allowance at the top here to join to the up base of the dress, and also half-inch allowance to join to the gathers. Okay, then at the up part here, I went ahead to add 1 inch above my shoulder, which I'm going to be joining it, and also creating a casing for my rope. Then I also added 1 inch here for my hemming at the sleeve point, and at this point I added half inch, which we join to the down base here. And in front of this other part where I have my overlap, I added 2 inches there, as you can see. Okay, so this is basically what I have for the front. So to cut my back now, I went ahead to place my pattern paper on my material in order to cut the back. And while cutting the back, I made sure to bend this back effect because I don't need it for my back. And I placed it on my material. And while placing it, I made sure to leave 1.5 inches in front for my zipper allowance. And then at the upper base and the down base, I added half inch for my joining above and the joining at the gathers region. Okay, then for the front part, remember that I use this pattern paper to cut both the front and back neck, so I'm just opening it up for the back neck depth to actually show, and I placed it this way in order to cut. So while cutting, I made sure to leave 1 inch above the shoulder point, which will be used for my rope casing, just the way I did for the front. And then the side now, I added 1 inch for my hemming for my sleeve, and then at this side I added 1.5 inch, just the way I added down for my zipper allowance. And I went ahead to add half inch, which I'll use to add to the other base. So this is basically what I have. Okay, then I also went ahead to cut my lining, and I equally went ahead to actually use Estee gum on the main fabric just to give it more thickness. Okay, so I don't actually want to cut lining for the upper base because it's already having gathers. So what I'll just do is to simply take away this pattern away, and I'll go ahead now and cut out facing alone for the front. But first, I'm going to hem the sleeve part of my front and back at the upper base, and before going ahead to cut out facing for each of them. Okay, so I'll go ahead now and cut facing for them and equally run a loose stitch for my gathers. So this is basically what I've done. This is the front and that is the back. So here I've gone ahead to do my facing and use hemming gum to actually hold it down. I equally went ahead to hem the side sleeve and also went ahead to run my loose stitch, which is the gathered stitch. Okay, and I equally went ahead to do it to the back. So this is basically what I've done so far, and this is what it looks like. So next I'm going to do, remember that we added 2 inches for our overlap, and I'm just going to mark that here, and I'll also mark it at the other parts of the front because this is just an overlap, so you need to replicate it. So you're going to have something like this. So now these points need to touch each other. Okay, how you're going to place it so you can get this overlap. So these points that I have marked with just 2 inches is like the midpoint. So when you're stretching it, stretch it in such a way that you don't stretch towards that down area where you have your 2 inches, but you can stretch the other side. So having done that, I'm going to place them and align it properly, ensuring that this point where I've marked those with my chalk, that's 2 inches, are placed on top of each other. Okay, and once I do that, I'm going to use my pin now to pin it down so that it can start forming, and I'll go ahead now and align everything properly. So having done that, I'm going to get my middle base, okay, which is this part. I'm going to open it up now and I'm going to indicate the midpoint, as you can see there. So that's the middle point. What I'm just going to do is to place it on top of this one, ensuring the right side are touching each other alongside with the midpoint, and I'm going to use pin now to secure it down. So you're basically going to have something like this by the time you are done pinning it down. You're going to have something like this, and next I'll go ahead and do is to stretch the remaining gathers to reach to the end of that point of our middle region. So once we are done with that, now I'm going to flip it over and then use pin to secure it down so I can go ahead and stitch this point. Okay, and once I'm done stitching, I'm going to have something like this. Once I'm done, okay, everything is going to be coming out so nicely. You can see your overlap. Okay, so having done that, now next I'll go ahead to do is to flip it over to the other side, and I'll take my lining and place it in this way, ensuring that it is more or less placed in a sandwich form, and I'll go ahead and stitch so that all the rough stitches can be hidden in between the lining and the main fabric. Okay, and I'll go ahead and do it to the back of the dress. So this is basically what we have, and you can see the rough stitches is hidden inside, and this is basically what the back look like, and this is our overlap. So I equally went ahead to actually do it to this other part of the dress. That's the back of the dress, and you can see everything is already coming out neat and beautiful. So this is the back. You can see that the rough edge stitches is hidden inside, and here I have my zipper allowance for the right side and equally the zipper allowance for the left side. Okay, so next I'm going to go ahead to do after this, I'm going to bring back the front of my dress and I'm going to make sure to place them accordingly. Okay, so now this is my front. I'll go ahead and take my back piece and I'll place them, ensuring their right sides are facing each other. I'm going to place it this way, and after that I'll go ahead and sew 1 inch for my shoulder. Okay, remember that we kept 1 inch above our shoulder, so I'm going to stitch this part here. And so after stitching both sides together, as you can see here, next I will go over to do is to open up my dress like this. So, and next I'll go ahead to do is to actually create a casing for my rope. So I'm just going to fold this part like this with 1/4 inch, just like I'm doing a bias, and I'll go ahead use iron to iron it so that stitching can be made easy. So I'll go ahead and do it for this side and do it to the other shoulder as well. So after doing that, this is basically what we are going to have. I've gone ahead to do my rope casing, and this is how it looks like when you've done that. And I went ahead to actually make a rope for it. I went ahead to do 4 ropes for each casing, and I'm going to be using my safety pin now to help me insert each and every one of it in there to make it easy for me. So once I do that, now I'm going to make sure it come out through the other point of where my neckline is, and I'll go ahead and take this part inside. You can see it's already coming out, so I took it inside so that the rope doesn't show, just slightly inside, and I'm going to go ahead and stitch it. But before stitching now, I will simply use my pin to pin it down so I can go ahead and do it to the other part of my shoulder, okay, by inserting the rope. And once I'm done with that, I will stitch it down with my machine, and this is basically what I'm going to have by the time I'm done. So after putting the whole rope inside, I'm supposed to have something like this. As you can see, you can stretch it, and this is basically what the front part looks like by the time you are done. Okay, you can see that the ruched effect is already made. So what I'll basically do next now is to join the front and the back piece together. That's the sides. So remember that we actually added 1.5 inch for our sewing allowance, so I'm just going to mark that at that point and also at the waist point. And then at this my sleeve part, I'm just going to mark 1/2 inch and I'll connect it to my under bust line with a curved line. Okay, so I'll simply use my pin to hold that down for easy stitching, and I'll go ahead now and replicate this at the other part of my sleeve. So once I do that, I'm going to mark it and I'll take it to the machine and then sew both sides together. Okay, so having done that, now this is basically what I have. You can see the runched shoulder is already taking place, and this is already basically what it looks like. Okay, this is the upper part of the dress. So next I'll go ahead to do is to cut the down section of the dress. Okay, so in order to cut the down section of the dress, I've gone ahead to bring the pattern paper that we drafted. Remember that our length is 45 inches, half length is 17 inches, and the back's effect, which you added 4 inches to make it 21. But here I'm going to be making use of the half length and not the back's effect. Okay, so I'm going to be using the half length, which is 17. That is what I'm going to be doing. I'm going to leave the 4 inches that was added to get the wax effect. I won't be needing it. So I'm going to say 45 minus 17 inches, which is my half length. You can see here my 17 inches is actually my half length and not the backs. The backs is actually 21, but I don't need the backs. Okay, so I'm going to be measuring that, and I got 17 inches. So I'm going to say my full length of gown, which is 45 minus 17, I'm going to get 28 inches. Okay, so here now, as you can see, I've gone ahead to cut the down part of my dress, and I got 28 inches, but I added 1.5 for my hemming and joining, making it 29.5 inches. Then for the width of the dress, here I have 3.5 yards already. So but alternatively, you can just do this way by measuring round of your waist of the upper, which is the half length, and whatever you get, you can times it by 3, you can times it by 4, depending on how much you want your gathers to be. Okay, so now I'm going to be making use of 3.5 yards for my gathers for the down base. Okay, so I'm going to illustrate how I want the down base of my dress to be, and I don't want mine to have a back's effect down because it's already having a back's effect at the waist. So I don't want it to have a back's effect at the down part. Okay, I just want it to look all straight, just the way you can see in the other structure that I drew at this other part here. that is the other side. I want it to look like this, all straight, and not have any backs effects like you can see in that picture. And for me to get that, what I simply need to do now, I've already gone ahead to fold my fabric into two. That's the 3.5 yards. I've gone ahead to fold it into 2 equal halves, and at this midpoint I'm going to come down by 4 inches. How I got this 4 inches is that, you remember from the waistline I added 4 inches in order to get my back line, which is 21. So I'm going to come down by 4 inches. Okay, so having marked that, now next I'll go ahead is to get the midpoint from this very point I'm measuring to the end. I'm going to get the midpoint because that's where I want the side to be. Okay, so having marked that point, I'm expected to connect this point to this point here. So because this cloth is already on a fold, I'll replicate it behind the other part, and I'll go ahead and connect it so that I can cut off this new line that I'm going to create with a slant line. And the reason why I'm doing it, so that this middle point here can be at this point, and then when I run my gathers is expected to enter this point, and then this point I marked here will now be at the side. Okay, and since this cloth is on fold, the other part is going to be at the other part of my side. Okay, and then the remaining side, which is the back, we have this entire space left from this point down. So what I simply need to do now is that I'm going to connect this part with a slanted line. Okay, and I'm going to cut off this line. Now this part I'm going to cut off is going to be replaced by the backs effect that is at the upper point of my dress. Okay, that is already at the half length. So that's because I don't want to have a backs effect at my gathers point, at my gathers gown. That's the gathers area. I don't want to have a backs effect. I want it to be all straight like this. So I need to cut off this part so that it can now be replaced by the upper part of my basque effect of my half length. Okay, and everything will be balanced because I don't want my backs to be at the down. I want it all straight, just the way you can see in the YouTube thumbnail of this video. Okay, so if I haven't explained that well detailed, next I'll go ahead and do right away is to actually cut out what I'll be needing for this tutorial. So I'll simply go ahead and carefully cut this out, and then I'll now go ahead and run my gathers to this whole point. And this is basically what I have. As you can see here, this is the side, this is the middle, and this other part that I have my chalk here is where the other side is going to be. You can see the slanted effect already, where the backs is already showing at the gathers, which when you place here, it's going to lap in properly. So here you make sure that the place where I put my chalk is aligning with the side, the middle point, and the other side of my dress. Okay, so I will simply go ahead now and make sure that they are well aligned and stretched properly, and I'm going to use my pin to stitch it down and take it to the machine to sew. So you just need your pin to actually pin it down to make it easy to stitch. So after that, this is basically what we have. This is the front, this is the basque effect already, and this is what the back looks like. You can see it's all straight and neat and beautiful. So next I'll go ahead now is to put my zip, and I'm going to show you guys what it looks like at the end of it. Okay, and this is basically what we have after everything. You can see the dresses came out so beautiful and so neat. So if you find this video very helpful, please hit the subscribe button, like and share to your friends who you might want them to also learn how to make this beautiful dress. So thank you, and see you in my next video.